All right, fantastic. Well, thank you all for coming today. We've got a little bit of a change of program because Walter Lynn is not able to be with us today. He is busy moving across town, so I can't imagine how fun it is to move at this time of year. It is ridiculously cold outside our house, so it's a great day to be inside doing stuff on the computer. What I would like to do today is we're going to continue our discussion from last time. And with last time we talked about, the value of sell-by marketing in a stocker herd and how your financials can help guide you along that process. We are going to do the same something similar today, but we're going to do it primarily in the context of a breeding herd. And I want to sort of draw some parallels there, but make sure we understand the differences. And I'm really glad that Wally's able to join us. He's the guy that, in my mind, has pioneered the explanation of this and really making it clear and accessible, and has done a tremendous amount of implementation and has created great examples of how to make this work. As we go, I would like to make this kind of a discussion. So if you have a question or a comment or a thought as we go, I want you to, stop us and jump in. Don't feel like we have to wait to the end or wait for a break. Just please interrupt. Sometimes on Zoom, it's a little awkward, if you've got your microphone muted, that sort of thing, to get up and going, but please feel free to interrupt. And if you're somewhere where we can, the volume is reasonable, go ahead and leave your microphone on so that if something comes up, you can interrupt. I mentioned Wally's here. I'm going to lean a little today later in the discussion on Aaron Helmick, who's there at Anathoth Livestock is his name there on Zoom. He actually has really pushed us this last year to really think carefully about how we generate reports with this exact thing in mind. And I think he and a kid that works for us, Daniel Strong, Daniel, is that you on here?
Yes, it is.
Yep. Daniel's done a lot of work with Aaron, sort of figuring out how to get reports to come up so that we can see what we're going to talk about today kind of in the financials. So with that, I'm going to start screen sharing. And like I say, if you have comments, thoughts, whatever, please feel free to interrupt. All right. Can you see my screen? Yes, no, maybe so.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Does it look like a title slide?
Yes, it does.
All right. Perfect. So, as we go, I stole a bunch of slides from Wally Olson. So some of these, if you've been to a school, are going to be repeats. The reason I'm sharing those is I want to put them in put what we're talking about today in that context. All right. So the place where this all starts, and we're going to come back to this a little bit at the end, is with mentality and psychology. And those are two words that mean slightly different things. I think about this a lot. When I think about being successful in any business, you have to sort of start with the right attitude, with the right mentality, and with the right psychology. One of the ways that we talked about in our last webinar, thinking about our business, is breaking apart marketing and production. And I want to show some examples of doing that. I have run into a number of people who I now know have encountered Aaron in the last few weeks, and they have talked about themselves as production ranchers, not marketing ranchers, excuse me. And that I hope will become kind of obvious as we go. The other thing I really want to make sure, I get to be a stickler sometimes about the importance of the specific words that we use when we describe our business and when we think about what we do. And within the context of sell-by marketing and a breeding herd, I think that's a pretty important transition that we need to make. And I think the way we define our business ought to have a lot to do with the value that we produce. And then the last thing we're going to touch on a little at the end is the fact that most of the things that we worry about, most of our fears, often are completely unwarranted. Before we go too far in this, I want to make sure we define a couple of things and that I'm really clear about where I'm coming from. A big part of this is that we ought to sell things that capture value that we create. Okay. And one of the things about value that's a lot of fun is that it is very, very subjective. So there are always two sides in every transaction. And if both are willing participants, there's a great idea that both sides believe that they are getting the better end of the deal. So if I sell somebody a gallon of fuel, they are, that gallon of fuel has more value than the $4 they might give me for that gallon of fuel. And the $4 has more value to me than the gallon of fuel. So the reason why exchange happens in, free and fair systems is because both sides of the same deal see the same price and both feel like they're getting a better value. It's always important to understand that the market determines the price, and that price is a reflection of the value of what we have to others. Our cost of production doesn't matter. How much we love it doesn't matter. How much it means to us doesn't matter. What matters really is what someone else is willing to pay for it. And again, our job really in managing our business is to produce value for other people and to create a margin. And that's how we support ourselves. Again, I want to go back to this idea that customer value is indicated by price. And when the price is higher, that means the customers value it more. And when the price is lower, customers value it less. We should allow the market to guide us in our decisions about sales. And we should allow our margins to influence us in what we produce. Any questions about that so far? Any comments?
John, are you going to go on about why we sell and why we buy?
No, would you like to?
Well, I will discuss it. The only reason you sell something is that you have found something, and since we're going to talk about breeding stock in your inventory that is undervalued, and so you sell this and you keep whatever's undervalued, and most of the time that would be a weaned heifer calf and stuff. The big thing is the reason you sell is to create cash flow so you can buy or keep something and rake off some cash by doing it.
Exactly. Okay, very good. And why do you buy?
So you stay in business.
Okay. And we always operate within the context that we sell something and we replace it.
That's
and
correct.
So our assumption, especially when we're talking about a breeding herd, and I'll get to this a little later, is that we are not selling cows or selling ewes or selling nannies to get out of the business. We are selling those and then replacing them and staying in the business. I'll have an example of that later.
One other thing though here,
please.
And this a little different, but when you're dealing with your three inventory factors, money, grass, and animals, there's times that and this happens more in the stocker than the cow-calf business, but there's times that the money and the grass may be undervalued compared to the animals. So the animal's overvalued you, so you sell her and you may be out of the business, for a while. But usually in a cow-calf or, in a breeding program, you're just trading, you're just selling the overvalued and keeping the undervalued, and you go on, whether it's a cow, a ewe, or a nanny goat.
And as you talk about at great length in your schools, and as we talked about last month, we understand how to do that based on the relationships between things. And I am not going to go over that today. We may come back to that again in the future, but again, that's a heavy topic in your school, that it's not necessarily the price, but the relationship between them.
Well, the price is irrelevant. It's the relationships that matter.
Very good. Thoughts or comments? Anybody else?
The other thing we need to add is the cost to get them back to where they were.
Correct.
Correct.
Right. Very good. Sometimes that's simply time. Sometimes that's feed. Sometimes it's a bull. Sometimes it's castration, that sort of thing. Yeah, very good.
Yep. And one thing, yeah, in the relationships, there's the relationship on what you feel is overvalued and what's undervalued. And then like Aaron was just saying, and then the relationship of the cost to get you back to whole, or when you're getting back to whole, is what you sold, what you kept is of equal. If you sell a bred cow, you've got to have enough money in there to make that heifer calf into a bred heifer.
Does everybody understand that? All right, anything else? All right, let's keep going. So here's where we're going to talk a little about strategy and tactics. Strategy, in my definition, is a plan of action that achieves a goal. And our goal in this example that we're going to talk about today is to run a profitable breeding herd. And so we are selecting strategy based, with that goal in mind, based on that goal. As Wally mentioned a minute ago, at any given time, we have things in our inventory, or we own things that are both overvalued and undervalued. And for those definitions, roughly, an overvalued item will bring us more than it costs us to replace it. And an undervalued item would bring us less than it costs to replace it. And that getting back to whole is an important concept there.
Show you something.
And then the summary of this plan, as described by Bud Williams, is sell the overvalued and buy the undervalued. And that sounds very simple. It actually, once you get accustomed to how to discover the relationships, it is quite simple. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy. It is important to note that this is very different from buying low and selling high. That is not the same. They are very, very different.
Well, one thing, may I state here?
Yeah.
Is one thing, buying low and selling high. And I went back to where I grew up in Oldsburg, Kansas, to the Swedish Supper. And a neighbor was there at the Swedish Supper that I really didn't like when I was there. And I discovered I still didn't like him. But he was telling me that when he retired, he was going to sell high and buy low, or buy low and sell high, and he was making snide remark about doing the marketing schools that I'm doing. And since I'm not very quick on my feet, but I've also learned that when you're really mad, that's when you're learning something, or you're being humbled up. And what I would have told Harlan is that, Harlan, you cannot buy low and sell high. You have to buy the relationship of what's overvalued to whatever's undervalued. There's nobody that can buy low and sell high. It's all in the relationships.
And that said, stated slightly different, buying relationships doesn't always pan out. So just in case you're misinterpreting this as advice for your personal life, it's slightly different.
Oh, well.
Sorry, there's a blame attempted at you.
That's somebody else's life experiences.
All right, so from strategy, we go into tactics. And one of the main tactics in our approach here is subdivision. So we often look at a breeding herd as kind of a uniform thing. And what I have learned from Wally Olson is that we divide this thing as many different ways as we can in our mind. And then look at relationships between the subdivisions. So for example, we can divide a breeding herd based on age. We have different sexes within that herd. We have different reproductive statuses. We have different conditions. There are other ways to do this. There are different qualities of animal. There could be different colors. There are a whole bunch of ways to do that. But the important thing is that we begin to look at all of the different potential products that could come out of this herd. And when I'm saying product, I'm thinking, saleable product. So in a cow-calf herd, for example, we have bull calves, we have steer calves, we have heifer calves, We have young cows, we have old cows, we have middle of the road cows, we might have big cows and little cows, fat cows and thin cows, you know, a whole fast cows and slow cows. We've got a whole lot of ways we can slice that herd. And when it comes to thinking about producing value, we need to think about what slices are overvalued and what slices are undervalued. We also have to understand, as Wally was talking about, the cost of moving between components. And this comes back to this idea of getting back to whole. Time is one of the wonderful things that I can buy, right? It costs dollars per month to run a cow. So let's say it's $30 per month to run a cow. If I need to do that for 12 months, that's $360. It costs me a certain number of dollars to preg check a cow. And then it costs me some money if I want to sort. All of those, you know, many of those things are time, yours or someone else's, and maybe feed, you know, as another important ingredient. And the other part of our final tactic in my mind is that we are constantly comparing our value to the market price. So we're constantly looking for what do we have and what is it worth to us and what is it worth to someone else. And exploiting or capitalizing on those differences is what we're really trying to get to.
Are you mad at me?
So when you talk about relationships, could you kind of explain that a little bit? I know you just did, John, but
no. So again, that's a great question, Daniel. So you know, I'm gonna give some graphs here in a minute to give relationships in a cow herd. But for example, generally there is a price difference.
Oh yeah. Here, make sure.
Let's see. Somebody's got background noise that it's a little high. Anyway, sometimes, you know, a 5-year-old cow is worth more than a 500-pound heifer. A pregnant cow is worth more than an open cow. An exposed ewe is worth more than a not exposed ewe, those sorts of things. Does that make sense, Daniel?
You're not locked into the same thing.
Correct.
Okay.
That's exactly right. And the way we quantify that difference is by the dollar value. So a bred cow may be worth $1,000 more than that replacement heifer, and it may cost us $500 to get that replacement heifer back to a bred cow. And so that's kind of the relationship in the getting back to whole. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna go through that more. Thanks. Any other questions or comments? All right, let's keep going. Going back to what we finished on in the stocker business discussion last time, Walter, if you recall, had a way of partitioning the value produced in the stocker business into, you know, production, or what I'm calling gain here, and marketing. And what I've got here is just a couple of simple cattle squares. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. So if you've never seen this before, I would recommend that you view the last video. But basically, I've got a couple of different cases here where we're showing different situations where we produce value through those two different channels in different ways. For this demo, I have assumed an 8-cent per hundredweight slide is normal, and anything over that you get is good marketing. So as an example, if I take a 500-pound calf that I purchase at $1.70, I think it did 8 cents. I might have done a different number. Anyway, 800-pound calf or 500-pound calf at $1.70, and I've sold an 800-pound calf at $1.26. I'm going to say that the majority of that value produced in the end of that is due to production, is due to weight gain on that animal. The slide between these has made that fairly neutral. And I think actually this should be $1.36. So excuse my error there, because I think I had 8 cents per hundredweight. All right. So then in the second example, I've taken a cutter bull, and I have not only castrated that bull, but I have, you know, added 300 pounds. Okay. In that case, I get 74% of my value from the castration, right? And then the remaining value from gain. Notice that the value here is pretty similar. There's a rounding error in there, which is why that's different. And then the last example, I've taken a cutter bull and all I did was castrate him, put no weight gain on, but realized a 20-cent increase in price, which is $100 basically, new dollars per head. And that this should say 100% right here. So $100 or 100% of my profit is coming from marketing or from changing the class of animal there, or, changing the condition of that animal. Does that make sense? Okay. Questions on this? Walter's in the process of finalizing a cool tool we can use just as an Excel-based thing that has a couple of sliders to look at how your purchases and sales relate to each other with regard to marketing and production. All right, if I take a standard sheep ranch, and I'm going to show you a few examples from this same outfit that are in different years. So I want you to know that we're using the same tract of land, same operator, that sort of thing. When I think of production out of a breeding herd, I primarily think about selling, in the case of sheep, lambs, and in cattle, calves. And what you see is for our customers, we produce every month we produce a sales by product and service table, or a sales by item table. And what that does is just say what number, dollar amount, and percent of our sales come from different things that we sell. In this particular case, out of this flock, in 2021, I believe, 97% of the gross income generated came from the sale of lambs, 2% came from the sale of rams, and 0.38% or less than 0.5% came from dog sales. Somehow I didn't get culls in this one, but I'm not sure what I did there. But as you can guess, most of us think about our production herds as primarily, it's a cow-calf herd or it's a ewe-lamb enterprise. It is the lambs or the calves, the offspring, are the primary product. Any questions about this? Okay. I'm going to skim through these real quickly. Sorry, Wally makes these slides in parts. He did this just so you would all know that I have stolen this from him. Wally has something that is called the cow bell curve, which is one of my absolute favorite concepts. And this idea is that in the cow business, it's similar but not the same in the sheep business, but the parallel is important. We have a value of a 500-pound heifer calf. And this is price, if you will. They appreciate up to the value of a bred cow, and then they depreciate back down to the value of a cull cow. Let me get to this one. This goes through some examples. If we take the prices given here, and again, Wally goes through this in detail in his class, so we're not going to spend too much here, but this is fairly similar to current market, where you could buy a heifer calf for, let's say, $800. You could buy a bred cow for $1,800. So there's about $1,000 worth of appreciation there, or, increase in value. And then when we go from a good quality prime of her life bred cow back to a cull cow, we give back that $1,000 and maybe more as we drop back down. The reason I show this is to show the segmentation within a single herd. So many breeding herds will contain 550-pound calves, and bred cows, and they will be worth $1,000 spread right there. And they will also have old cows, which will be worth, $700, $800, $900. Does that make sense? Okay, if we put this into the context of it, make this a little more graphical with real numbers, what we've done is this is age of the cow in years, and this is the price of that cow. Again, as a yearling, right? She's worth about $800. As a cull cow, she's worth $700. What we often do with these numbers is average them. And what we know is that averaging is a bad idea when you have data that looks like this. What happens is that calf increases in value to become a bred cow and plateaus for a while, and then that value drops back off towards a cull animal. Obviously, at any time, if she comes open in here, we can drop that faster. But usually once they're up here, you know, the probability that they get bred and the value of them is usually stays fairly high. This is an example from Wally's brother-in-law that I have also copied here. And what this shows is what we'll call a conventional herd or a production-oriented herd against a high turnover herd. And the high turnover is what we're thinking of as either our sell-by or a seed stock type herd. And what we see as we transition from the conventional to the high turnover herd is both an increase in cash flow, and I think there's one more, an increase in cash flow, okay, and a positive change in net worth. Okay, so the amount of money you make goes up and your balance sheet gets stronger.
Well, one thing, John, we need to point out there is we did not, in theory, you did not have to go rent more land or buy more land or anything. All you did was good marketing.
Or borrow more money.
Or borrow more money, yes. Or, you know, all you did was just change your marketing, and Shazam, you improved. The way I look at it, you made Ranch 44% bigger, you know, and as far as income, you know.
That's exactly right. Now, the one thing that's cool about this, Alan's, in this case, this is Wally's other brother-in-law, right? Who actually did this. So these are not projections. These are not based on market reports, that sort of thing. These are actual numbers. I should point out that the numbers plotted in this graph that we used here, hang on, these are also market numbers from cow sales off a single ranch on a single day.
Single day, yes.
Okay, so let's get back to here. So this is what this looks like in a cow-calf operation. And again, the biggest thing you'll notice is when we look at sales, and I haven't done percentages here, but you know, we're basically looking at calf sales being the big part of what's generating revenue, cull cows being a in this case significant but smaller part. As we move over here, bred cows become a significant part of the income, and calves become, they're still significant, but a lesser part of the income.
Hey, hold up.
Hey.
There's the one really important thing about the slide that we always, excuse me, I shouldn't say always, that we forget to comment on. When
Yes.
you go down to the sales category and look at the inventory numbers, there was probably, well, I won't say probably, there's for sure less feed used on the high turnover side than there would be the conventional side of keeping all those cows.
Yep. Why is that?
Your weight, your inventory.
Right.
So we didn't just grow the ranch by 44%. We grew it by 44% in sales, but we also grew it by, you know, stock days, or you guys would call it animal units or something out there as well.
And we have the choice there to either leave that as more residual to increase our stocking rate to capitalize on that, or, you know, call that cushion if you want for good years and bad years, right?
Yeah, but it's not to be overlooked is my point.
It's a great point. Really good point. All right. Let's go one more here. All right. So this takes it. This is real data from the same ranch I showed you the lamb sales on. This is the next year. So 1 year later, that operation changed its strategy, and instead of selling production, began marketing breeding animals, okay, which I think of as a seed stock operation. Okay, so, oops, sorry. So here's what we've got. If you look, and Daniel, I made a couple of adjustments in your product list, but this report is actually the brainchild of Daniel Strong, as he's kind of tried to get through this. What you notice is that lambs here on this ranch, instead of being 97 or 98% of sales, are actually 32% of sales. Cull ewes are 1.5% of sales, or under 2% of sales. And these mature ewes are good quality breeding animals. These are now 65% of sales.
Yep.
Okay.
Can we talk about that slide a minute?
Please.
There's a couple interesting things that I know this guy, and the couple things that they really did badly was that they spent a lot of time focusing on their coal use sales because they were really struggling there. You know, one of Bert Taggart's things he talks about is increasing your value of your coals, just marketing them a bit better. So that rancher spent a lot of time that year developing better use sales. And at the end of the year, his accountant hands him this report and where it was only 1.85% of his sales. And what a waste of time. The other interesting thing about this, sales were up in dollars, but if you should have noticed from the report before, lamb sales in terms of the dollar amount, you know, price was way down on these lambs. So it was a great offset as well. I mean, we were looking at 258 on the last report that we saw for the average price of the lamb leaving.
And now we're down to 174, right?
Yeah, the take home there is if we were just relying on this model for production, this rancher here would really be struggling. Even though he made more lambs, production is just not cutting the mustard.
Very good. Any questions about this? One thing I should mention, it's these top two categories are lambs. This also has they transfer some to a feeder operation or a development operation and then sell some outright off the ewe. So those two summed together is lamb production in dollars.
Do you have that other slide for the feeders?
For which one?
The development.
I do not. No, I did not get to that one. Well, but I want to talk about that briefly at the end. Is that okay?
Yep. Sorry.
All right. Okay, so let's now go to let's do the same comparison, but in a cow-calf herd. So this is real data. This is a cow-calf operation. This is not exactly a typical operation, but it's not completely abnormal either. But again, their focus is on selling calves. And as you notice, steer and heifer calves make up, 80% of the production off that herd. Okay. And cows, make up 12%. Okay. These numbers, are just a little, like I say, they're not perfect, but these are real examples. If we go to a seed stock cow herd, this is another set of real data where this is in an environment where we have fall and spring bred cows. What we have here is that spring-born calves are 50% of the income out of this enterprise, and the other 50% comes from cow sales. I should definitely mention in all of these examples, these people are still in the breeding business. Okay, these are not people that have sold the cows and gone out of business. They have sold and bought back. They've been in the process of getting them back to whole. These sales numbers do not describe the getting back to whole part. They're just showing the total sales out of there. So again, we can visit more about that in a bit. But this is a kid right here who really started thinking about himself as a female salesman. And interested in supplying his customers with good quality bred cows. He does not calve out any fall cows. He lives in an environment where that is not a good idea. He does calve out some spring bred cows, but he has followed Wally's plan pretty closely, and basically everything that's a 5 coming 6 is leaving the ranch. There are old cows on the ranch, and he has some lease cows, but there are no 6-year-old cows on the ranch as it stands currently. And if there are, they're ones that were kind of not marketed, right? So if you have a 6-year-old that just isn't going to make the grade and bring any money selling, but you will bring you a calf, we might keep that. All right, so in that context of that comment about will you go out of the breeding business if you do this, this is another set of data that we're fairly familiar with. Going back to 2008, this particular individual has made the majority of his income every year from the sale of cows. And, for 15 years has not gone out of the cow business. I'm not exactly sure what happened with the 2010 data, 2010 in the Southern Plains was a terrible year. So it's actually possible there were no cows that year, but I'm not sure that's the case. But what you notice is there are a few exceptions, but most years, the majority of income is coming from cows, not coming from calves. When we think about a cow-calf ranch, we often think about sale of calves. We talk about the price of calves. We talk about the weight of calves. We rarely spend a lot of time thinking and talking about the value of our breeding animals. And I would suggest going back to this graph that the fact that there is basically more than a doubling in this space price-wise means that we should probably spend a lot more time thinking about the value of our breeding stock. I want to go back, Aaron, you mentioned Burke Teichert. I had the good fortune of spending a fair amount of time with Burke Teichert. I consider him a wonderful friend. He gives a lot of advice about controlling costs and that sort of thing, which I wholeheartedly believe in. That said, I think you can cut yourself, or you can manage that way, and do a great job of production, keep your cost of production low. I think you can manage yourself to a small profit that way. And in some years, it'd be a good profit. What I have learned from Wally Olson over the years takes that and adds to it, and from Bud, a bunch of marketing. And that is where the big profits really lie. Most people are not willing to do this. Most people are not willing to, sort of go through not just the mental exercise, but also the sort of psychological process that needs to happen in order to sort of have this work. That said, that people that do it, of the clients that we have that are currently applying this, they are the most profitable, and it's not close. There is a vast gulf between the income of people who market in their breeding herd versus sell the production from their breeding herd. All right. So with that, let's take some questions there, and then I want to come back, Aaron, to this development split that we talked about. I want to come back to that in a minute. All right, questions or comments, thoughts?
Go back to that last slide.
All right. The multi-year one?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah. One thing you want to understand that is me, and I bounce around, but the big thing is what I'm upset with as you look at this is, if you look at 21 and 22, did you notice how my cow sales have dropped? And we're having problem getting the marketing done, and the drought is affecting us. And so you always need to be really, always be built. One thing that Bud just drilled into me is always be building time in your herd. And in other words, getting them younger, and then building cash, we are, the last 2 years have been hard to do that and stuff.
And I'm gonna go back to this graph for a second as a proxy for time, right? This is literally age on the bottom axis, so it is time. But the time, the length of time between here and here, here and here is long. It is shorter there, ever shorter as you come. So thinking about time, when you say building time in, that means having a herd that resides more on this end of the curve. Right?
That is correct. And
okay.
And one thing to where this is, and I have not got this done yet, but one thing to make it really profitable, if you can, you get, as soon as you can sell a cow for capital gains that she's overvalued, you sell her and buy a heifer calf back. You understand what I'm saying? So instead of working for longevity, I would look at what I'm more interested in is developing heifers that can breed for their second calf. That's the one thing I'm really interested in getting, that's what to me, that's a whole lot more valuable than longevity.
And that's actually something that Bert Teichert has taught us a lot about, right? As far as exposing all the heifers, let the bull select your most fertile heifers, and then those are the most likely to breed back as 3-year-olds. Not everybody has the 3-year-old problem, but many people do.
Yep. And I know for myself, that's what we were doing is breeding, you know, all of the heifers, but being real tough on them. And you know, when you're preg checking and you know, and everybody gets really worked up when, you know, half the cattle are open, you know, and for us, you know, you could tell the tension that was building as we were preg checking, because you know, the open pen was right, you know, as they came out of the chute, the breds went one way and the opens went straight away. And you know, there's getting to be lots of opens in there. And I finally had to stop and say, you know, the vet that was preg checking was getting nervous. Everybody there was getting nervous. And I had to explain to them that, you know, it's not a bad deal because we are finding what's really going to be good, you know, and we also got something to sell, you know, and so it, you know, you need to understand that, you know, because, you know, to me, the paradigm of the cow-calf business is anytime you turn a bull out with it, it's got to get bred. Well, no, that's not right, you know, and if you have something that's open, you know, that it's not the end of the world. You know, you can do other things with it and stuff. So like I said, you just need to rethink and truly think about the value and what's happening.
Well, just on the tax part he's talking about there, what's the difference in ordinary income versus capital gains?
Well, you know, one thing is usually, and I don't know if the tax rate right now, but, you know, that capital gains is usually about half of ordinary income. And the other big thing on capital gains is you do not have to pay self-employment tax, which is 15%. And you got to decide whether you want to manage your retirement or you want the government to manage your retirement, you know, and stuff. Now, granted, I worked for the ranch for 20 something years, you know, and I get, you guys, bless you younger people, I get a check in the mail that's very nice every month. So, you know, Social Security isn't bad, but I think you could do a whole lot better off investing your own money where you want to invest it. And that's why I'm, you know, Bud Williams, you know, I'd go down and spend weekends with him. And I mean, every weekend he had spent, I don't know how many hours thinking through what he was going to teach me that weekend. And one weekend I was a stalker guy, you know, to hell with them cows. And we had sat down and we spent, you know, 2 days going over how cows can be profitable. And, I mean, it was probably one of the best weekends I have ever spent in my life, you know. I'm done.
Okay, quick questions or comments?
I'm curious about, so like the, what's my question is that, your fallout rate between 2-year-old and 5-year-old is going to be higher than 5-year-old to 10-year-old, right? Is there anybody that tracks that so that you can kind of, you know, I realize that you can mitigate that loss by exposing your heifers properly and, you know, properly breeding your heifers. And that's probably one of the main, probably the main way to mitigate that, if not completely do away with it. But I think that's something that's probably worth considering, is that the reason that these cattle go up in value is because the older they are, up until 5, the more confidence we have that they're going to breed back, and also the more confidence we're going to have in that they're going to be a better mother, right? It's not just that the market's stupid; it's just that the market that you know, that's the reality.
That's the market, and also the long held paradigms that, you know, a cow, since most people use straight line depreciation, a cow isn't paid for until she's 7 or 8 years old. And you know, when you go back and put depreciation exactly where it happens, you know, it is not straight line like that graph shows. And so you need to be, very aware of that. And, but I'm with you that, you need to be, you need to have a plan for how you're going to handle the open, heifers or cows. As you start out, come up open and stuff.
Yeah.
Aaron, you looked like you had a comment on that also.
I see the fallout going the other way. Our fallout is much less than a high turnover herd.
You want to explain it a little?
Well, the only thing I can, I guess, attest that to is that the things that become problems are gone before they're a problem. So we typically have a lower turnover and in terms of the ages, because they're moved out. Anything that's going to be a problem, a little slower, bad bags, bad feet, anything like that, they're gone before they develop that here. So we actually end up keeping less replacements rather than more. We may expose a few more on the front end. There's more of those that are marketed for sale rather than kept for replacements.
And Sarah, I know you're driving. You may or may not be able to talk, but what percentage of the kids do you wean when you sell a pregnant nanny?
100%.
And that is actually better than your kidding percentage, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So Sarah takes a 20% increase in her kidding percentage when she sells the kid inside the doe, as opposed to keeping them and running. So that's another one that, I marvel all the time. I've shared with many of you the idea that you go to a horse sale and the mare with a good foal by her side will sell for less than a pregnant mare bred the same way, bred the same stallion that's a month away from foaling. Our ability to imagine potential is a lot higher than what it ought to be. Let's just say that.
Yeah, just to clarify, John, that's weaning rate, not kidding rate.
I'm sorry.
So there's a 20.
Yeah, you're correct. Very good. All right. Anything else on that? Because that's a good, Hondo, you bring up a super good point there. But I think overall what we're seeing is that you can slice this pie a bunch of different ways. I don't see examples where you don't make more money.
Yeah, no doubt.
When you sorry.
Yeah, no doubt, and it's not necessarily a contentious point about.
No, I understand. Yeah.
I feel like that probably people's paradigm is that a cow actually does become more valuable. Correct. Because likelihood of her breeding back and likelihood of raising a better quality calf from 2 to 5.
Totally agree.
And it starts to go down. So that was my only.
Yeah. No, it's very good. Very, very good. All right. Anybody else? All right. Before we transition to that lamb development deal, Aaron, I would like you to talk a little about the transition you've made and kind of what it has meant in bigger picture terms also.
How far here? Far back?
You can go as far back. I mean, you choose. Totally up to you.
I'm gonna kind of paraphrase the front in that things were getting tight and eating money, as we call it, was almost non-existent. Wally graciously spent a lot of time with me on the telephone before attending a school, and we started some sell-by trading with some stuff to get going to kind of learn it. And then as we've moved forward here, I took a little note here. So I'm going to fast forward to the end and then fill in. The report that John and Daniel put up there were the percentages of the sales. The paradigm, I think, is how many people would maybe make the adjustment if they had the report to know where their money was actually coming from. Because the paradigm for us is that we were doing very, very well on a production standpoint, and our gross margins were very, very, and are very good on the production model, but we have to scale it so large that we have to add overheads constantly or more land, and it becomes an exhaustive wheel process. when we started with the marketing and seeing that the changes are there, a couple of things happened. Our income went up, which was a yay. But the big thing, there was another paradigm change that had to come. John and Daniel renamed our accounts, and I really did not like that. In other words, I don't do change well, and it sounds insignificant that they renamed our accounts but I think Bud's the one that used to say too that words matter. So we've changed those to a development type enterprise because we see now that more and more of our dollar is actually going toward that rather than production. And I shared with Sarah earlier today that the interesting thing is that production only accounts for 30% of what we do. And so like in a storm, when we're out there today and we're working really hard to get animals ready, we're not doing that to produce more or save more lambs. We're doing that so the base rolls through, if that makes sense.
Explain what you mean there.
It changes the paradigm. So I'm going to be hard. There's 2 lambs that use there's 2 ewes that lamb today, which is insignificant. But you want to spend your time out there trying to wrestle those ewes and get those lambs and get them up to a barn out of the storm. But when you realize at the end of the day how little they contribute, I can only spend so much time doing that. My time needs to be somewhere else. And production is so little of our time. I'm not trying to be a bad steward. We'll work with them for a while, but then if we start causing mothering issues, we have to leave them alone. The other interesting thing about what has happened here on this, there should be a category here. Where's our ewe lambs? Is Daniel here?
Yeah. So that which ones?
There was the 60-day enterprise that counted for.
Hang on. That's a different one. Hold on just a second.
Right. Daniel would got this right on the first time.
I believe it. Is that this one? So this is the feeder enterprise. Is this what you want to talk about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the middle column there, I think, Daniel. Is that right? That we developed our ewe lambs from?
Yep.
Not sure. John?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. Well, the point is where you're going. Okay. The point is the top enterprise, which is a large part of the sales, that one runs year round. The one there in the middle, that was 60 days. I mean, we do that deal right there for 60 days. And so when we start talking about looking through things from the 80-20 lens of, we talked about time earlier and how we can buy time. That's buying a lot of time right there for a little bit of effort. If that was kind of the take home from that. And without these reports that these guys have showed me, if someone's asked me about that enterprise a dozen times, I'm like, yeah, we do it, but we don't do much of it. I don't really like it. It's fall cash money is all it is. It doesn't provide much income. The 60 days was almost 23% of sales. I thought that was interesting.
Okay, and so this is a place when we talk about the words deal, this used to be a feeder lamb enterprise. Well, as soon as we figured out that we could sell breeding quality lambs out of that enterprise, we better stop referring to that as a feeder enterprise, right? That is no longer correct.
There's a $50 per head difference for changing the name. In other words, thinking about it and changing the paradigm of how you think about it sounds insignificant, but it really matters.
Now, these, to be clear, you also sell replacement sheep or breeding ewes that are, not been wormed and kind of done that whole thing, right? And so that's a different type of thing. This is strictly a fairly plain Jane commercial lamb, commercial ewe lamb that is breeding quality for someone else to take. And like you say, that name change is worth $50. And the sort
that whole pile is lumped in there in terms of the sort, but yes, it's that's how that category comes to be.
Yeah, very good. Does that make sense to everybody? I've seen here recently a young man that's got a great deal going up north. He's doing something very similar with stockers. He breeds a few. He brings 30% more for those. with basically no extra effort other than turning the bull in and pulling the bull out and preg checking them. His cull, you know, he still is selling a very high value cull in a high quality feeder calf. But if he can skim off an extra 30%, you know, or add another 30% without adding a whole new enterprise, right? Without adding a lot more work, he doesn't have to, you know, go set out an electric fence and run a bunch of pigs. He just added it right to the enterprise that he has. And this is getting to my most recent saw here of late, which is we have to do better more than we have to do bigger. In the enterprises that make this switch, as Wally said, we don't increase the land base. We don't increase borrowed money. We often don't increase labor much. What we do is we get better at running our enterprise. We look at it in a different way. And that different perspective is what produces, in some cases, you know, hundreds of thousands of additional dollars. You can kind of play around with the percentage, but takes you from what in my mind is a very good, you know, Burt Teichert type ranch with low costs and, you know, good production systems and happy employees, takes that to the next level where it becomes a Wally Olson ranch where we're looking at, you know, 20+% returns on a regular basis. When in the reason for this bigger or better before bigger thing comes from a lot of thinking I've been doing lately about making sure we are quantifying turnover. So remember the 3 keys for profit, right? Turnover is one of them. Turnover needs to be measured in dollars before it is measured in, you know, numbers, like head counts, right? If we chase a large margin, or if we switch to sales that produce a larger margin, we have increased our turnover if we have not increased our base asset, right? So Aaron go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's important to get that across, that you start thinking about your inventory that way, not in heads.
Okay, and we're still going to always count them, right, by the head or by the ton if it's feed or, you know, but the dollars are what move the needle. This is a switch for some people, and I didn't understand how good a switch it was or how important it was to make sure we're thinking of it this way. So if Aaron has the same base of ewes and can produce more money, his turnover has gone up. What's interesting to me is that if you increase turnover by increasing the margin first, turnover follows. And then if you choose to further increase turnover, you have a very high margin and you are not going to fall peril to, you know, not fall into many of the traps that people who grow before focusing on margin do. So if we take a marginal margin and try to do more of it, we often wind up with less margin. If we take a very strong margin and do more of it, we might wind up with less margin, but we might go from a 28% margin to a 24% margin. I'm good with that. What I'm against is working for no return. I really don't like that. You can ask my wife, I'm very lazy. That just drives me crazy. If I'm going to work more, I want to make more money. And in many cases, you know, what we're talking about in terms of adding to the base is trivial. It is some labor. And it's definitely a change of focus. Aaron, you spend more time looking at sale reports than you did a year or two ago, correct?
Correct. And
I would ask Wally the same thing. Huh?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say I'd ask Wally the same thing, but I have to go back 20 years to get to that point.
Yeah. The other thing that was very important for us, and I hope this is not wasted information on the crowd here. I don't know them, but you were able to run a scaled ranch essentially with a fifth of the operating dollars we would need to stock it, you know, in a traditional turn them out in the spring, gather them in the fall system. So your interest rate does not change on the borrowed money, but your effective interest per head or interest per unit of dollar ran through the system drops drastically. I didn't value that fully until the last couple of weeks.
And that's a great point. I actually used to record interest as a direct cost. And for a couple of different reasons, Walter has disavowed me of that notion. But exactly what you're saying would happen, right? If you have the same total interest dollars and you're dividing it by more turnover, interest cost per head goes down. You become more efficient.
Correct.
You get to keep more of what you use.
And you're also running at lower risk because you have less dollars exposed that are somewhat borrowed.
Okay, so let's talk a little about risk. Risk management, in this case, mitigation, comes from a couple of different sources. One risk is coming from increased transactions in and out of the market. Okay, the ultimate way to mitigate risk is with margin. So you've done both of those things, and then just like you say, you're spinning less dollars. So the fewer dollars you have hung out there, the better. Great points, Aaron. Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
All right, I want to give you a quick contrast to this, and then I think we can probably wrap up unless there are other questions. I am constantly bombarded with phone calls, especially the last year, of people who are in production ag and who are either in the middle of a transition or have made the transition and are now deep in the throes of developing a direct consumer business because that is how they're going to create more money. That is a brutally difficult business to be in. Often decreases turnover, increases, the time an animal is resident on your ranch, increases the complexity, increases your, interactions and dependence on people like processors, increases your dependence on people that build websites and maintain them and help you sell and marketing and funneling and all these things. The direct-to-consumer business is a very difficult business. It is often oversold as a very good business. Now, there are people that do it well. And the most famous one, who I have no criticism of, is Joel Salatin. And he does it, and he does it incredibly well. We have some customers that do it well. But there are lots of people that don't do it very well, and they are really struggling. I suggest that most people get interested in that, not because they love consumers and that's what they really want to do with their life, but because they think it will make them more money. And I would argue that if that is the reason why you're considering a direct-to-consumer business, I would suggest you should look inside what you are already doing and see if you can't capture a lot more money. This concept grasping this concept is a little difficult. I don't consider myself a stupid person, although I am stubborn. It took Wally Olson 3 years to fully convince me of the cost of cow depreciation. I had fully embraced the idea of buying old cows and keeping heifer calves out of them, right? And avoiding the drop in price. What I did not understand and fully appreciate is capturing the value of appreciation. And the reason it took me so long is because I thought the cash flow was going to be a problem. I understood the appreciation, but I figured the cash flow was going to be a problem. Years ago, I think it was, I'm trying to think what year it was when it finally all clicked. I want to say it was 16. It was right around the time the market was crashing. Right around there, it all of a sudden dawned on me that the cash flow doesn't decrease. It just comes from a different place. And that if you are willing to, develop that market, and again, learning how to sell bred cows to somebody is not as hard as learning how to sell them ribeyes. I'll just tell you that. And it's certainly not as hard as selling soup bones. Learning how to do that is not that difficult, but it does take a little bit of thought. And as someone that was a May calver, I had to think carefully about, I didn't take these bred cows to the sale in November after preg check and sell them. We did it a little differently than the way Wally did it, who often sold them in the fall. We decided to winter them, sell them spring and capture that, which meant that we had a feed cost and that sort of thing in them. But I think whether you're in the north, whether you're in the south, whether you're a fall calver, a spring calver, whether you're sheep, goat, whatever, these breeding herds have incredible value. And I have also become very convinced that the value of building that asset base and converting your income to capital gains has a whole nother set of benefits that are just fantastic. Again, I come out of the avoid taxes the bad way and then learn the ranching for profit way of, don't worry about taxes. And I've come back sort of to the middle of, Once you get to a certain income level, you need to manage taxes because they're big. If you're paying $100,000 a year in taxes, it's probably your biggest single expense. I don't want to give that much money away. I don't want to give 50,000 away. There's somewhere in the middle there where it's like, okay, we need to manage this. And one of the most incredibly powerful tools you can use is breeding stock. We're going to talk more about this in the future, but that conversion from ordinary income and what I will call a primarily sweat-based business to a more asset-based business that converts to capital gains income, that is a very powerful transition throughout your career. And this, in my mind, plays into it perfectly.
One thing on that note, one thing after Bud got done with me, I started running my business differently. I stayed in the stocker business. But what I did is I made money in the stocker business, and I used my cow herd to exit money out of the business. And
out of the stocker business.
Yeah, what's that?
Out of the stocker business, and then ultimately into cash, right?
Yep. And it worked out, very well. One thing when you're paying taxes, taxes are stepped up, and so you always want to try to pay, the minimum tax rate taxes as much as you can. And then when you go up to the next level is when you start wanting to manage your taxes, Back in the 80s, I spent a couple of years not paying any taxes. And let me tell you what, that wasn't a very fun place to live and stuff. So,
as Aaron would say, the eating money was kind of thin, wasn't it?
The eating money, that's a very good, the eating money was pretty thin.
Not a lot of Cadillacs and LTDs in that part of the life, was there?
But like I said, since I started doing that, it's just amazing, how well it works. I mean, you just, use those stockers and also to be making money in the cow business. But, it just worked out very well for me and stuff.
Hey, Wally, John, how important? I'm sorry, George, go ahead.
No, so you're doing that by taking the profits from the stockers and then using those profits to buy back breeding stock?
No, what I was doing is I had the stocker business, and then I had the cow-calf business, and basically what the money made in the stocker business paid to run the cows. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then the sale of the cows, since it went out in capital gains and we didn't have to pay self-employment, that's how I would take money out of my business, is via that.
And that's, Wally, that was in the time around your retirement, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you were at the end of your full-time career at that point.
Yeah.
That makes sense, George? Okay. As I think you and I have talked about, growth and reinvestment in different assets is tax deductible in your business. So as long as you're producing enough cash flow to keep doing it, whether you choose to keep heifers, whether you invest, new money, whether you invest, stocker money in that or the profits thereof, that you can build that either way, and that is tax deductible. The great thing is as you step your tax situation, your tax rate down as you get closer to retirement, that makes the exit much easier.
Wally, John, like if you were trying to convince someone to get to a school that's never been, how important is it, especially if they have other plans? How important is it?
Well, that's a great question. You tell me, what's $1,000 at Wally Olson School worth?
Depends on the year, but this year's been pretty good.
Pretty good. And the great thing is you don't have to pay any more to go, to use the same information next year. I hope all of you have gotten an email from me. We think it's important enough. And like I said, the results in our customers speak for themselves. So, we're doing a deal at end of January, beginning of February, 31st through the 3rd, where all of you as Ranch Right subscribers, if you're a regular customer, can come down and attend the school for free. The results people are getting are phenomenal. It's not close, right? There isn't like a gradual change from the super profitable down to the marginally profitable. There's a big jump. And in the last 2 years, it's been a great opportunity to highlight it as the price of breeding stock has been very volatile, both in sheep and in cows. I don't know as much in goats. Sounds like goats have been more stable, but that volatility has created some fantastic opportunities. And if we can get you the information you need to know how to capitalize on those opportunities, and you're paying attention to markets and that sort of thing, it's a very, very powerful synergy.
And since you're coming for free, it doesn't really bother me to give my money back guarantee. Yeah. Always hedging your bet. Always
Such a big talker. All right. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat box. I don't know if you saw it or not.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Sage. I meant to get back to that. Sage, can you explain this, or do you want me to read it? Because I am not entirely sure I understand what you're asking.
I was just trying to synthesize what I was hearing and make sure I was hearing it correctly.
Yep.
A lot of really like good people stay in cow-calf, and I've spent a lot of time wondering like why. And it might be for a corporate ranch, for example, like the Burke-Teichert model can work, and it's because of what you just said, right? It's because of the capital benefits, really. And usually it couples with a profitable business somewhere else. Otherwise, cow-calf would not be sustainable. And this is doubly true, or more than that, because 80% of the cow-calf herds are herds of under 50 that are basically a hobby, which it fulfills the same purpose. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a great place to park capital. Am I looking at that right?
I think so, yes, and particularly if you're parking capital out of another owned business. One thing,
if you were to go study the cow-calf ranches, even corporate ranches, is I truly don't think that they're, the ranch is bought and paid for, and they are not really recouping the value of the grazing. You understand what I'm trying to say? I'm going to
argue with you on that.
Well, I'm depending on the ranch, and
that's correct. Okay, fair enough.
But and then another thing is a lot of people have been just, if you owned a cow in 2014, I seriously doubt if you're still profitable for the depreciation that you took on her, the loss of value that you took on her and stuff. And so the appreciation that we've had going on in land has kept, the reason there wasn't a great bust then is because the appreciation in land, and the bankers have just, we have kicked the can down the road and stuff.
Yeah, and allowed a little float in there is because, well, this other asset has gone up in value so much we can afford to refinance you and restructure that. Yeah. So just to be clear, the system Burke-Teichert comes out of, owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, those ranches are profitable year in and year out in real sense, and they pay a market rent to themselves. And if they don't do that, they stop owning them. There's a ranch not far from here that they sold because after about 3 years, they could not make it profitable. There's another thing to consider also, that those ranches are in the cow-calf business because they are in the emergency food production business. So there are times when huge swaths of the LDS church production go to disaster or charitable relief type projects. So there is a secondary purpose for those ranches that includes disaster preparedness. So just so we're clear. But most of those ranches have been profitable for decades. And I know that some years they make $1, but they are profitable. And I think profitable at a marginal, an acceptable long-term level, but not at the level that operators like Wally are. Not at the level that operators like Aaron are.
Are there any other questions?
Sage, does that answer your question?
I think so. Yes. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, you bet. And your last phrase there, when the combination, right? So the tax strategy, the asset management strategy, and the marketing, I think that is where the supercharging really happens. And we are going to talk more in the future about asset management type topics. But when we think about the sell by marketing strategy, that in my mind is what we are doing. We are managing one of our most valuable, frankly, most volatile assets, which is our livestock, the breeding component of our livestock. All right, then with that, if there are no other questions, I'm very thankful that you've all participated today. I need to share a couple of thank yous. The first one, of course, is, Bud and Wally have been terribly instrumental in helping me understand this over the course of quite a few years, as it turns out. And Aaron Helmick and Daniel Strong, Daniel works for us. Aaron is obviously one of our customers, have worked really hard to sort of make this thing work. And what's been really a lot of fun is that as Aaron has been pretty vocal about what his needs are, and what he's trying to understand, it has been fantastically helpful to sort of push us to where we need to be to be helpful. And so that's really one of our goals. So, feedback from our customers is kind of what helps us push to do better. And I think that, again, becomes a real important partnership over time, that as these things come to light, then, we can try to come up with ways we can, sort of answer different questions or solve different problems or provide better information. So I'm really thankful for Daniel. He's been with us now for 1.5 years or more even, and has really come a long way, and has been, I love to use the term creative and accounting in the same sentence, but he has been very creative with how he uses QuickBooks to produce results. And I am super excited about a lot of the stuff he's been getting done lately. So I thank you all. I want to wish you a Merry Christmas, and I hope if you're in a cold place, I hope you stay warm, and look forward to seeing all of you soon. And again, for our subscribers, if you can make it to Wally's class that starts January 31st and ends February 3rd, I would love to see you there. It'd be a good opportunity for us to visit, and you to visit amongst yourselves, which would be really good. So have a great day.
If any of you have any questions or thoughts or anything, just get a hold of me. I'll gladly help you or confuse you, whichever.
John,
that may help.
John, if you could just read my message I sent to you. It's not, I don't want to take up time with it, but that would be
you're all right. Is it where is it? Is it in the chat, or tell me where? I am not seeing it.
Are you Ranching FYI host?
No, that's Wally.
That's me.
Wally, you want to read that?
No, this is actually more personal to our operation. So.
Oh, okay. All right. You want me to read it to myself, or you want me to read it out loud?
You know what? I'm gonna copy it to you. Who are you?
I am Ranch Right.
All right. Sorry.
That's all right. Sometimes Wally's the host, and sometimes I'm the host. It just depends on the platform.
Appreciate it.
Yes, I totally agree. Do you want to talk about that in more detail?
I'm not necessarily, just we're meeting tomorrow, and our meeting is coming up. It's probably something that's kind of important. So maybe you could think about it.
You bet. You bet. Very good. Will do.
Thanks.
You bet. All right, I'm going to quit the recording. We can stay on for a minute and